Chris Hedges and D.A. Pennebaker. It's a beautiful piece of filmmaking, which, of course, yes, a beautiful piece of filmmaking, obviously, that resonates for everyone, and I guess you bear the burden of your reputation, goes before you. Nobody expects anything less than beautiful filmmaking from you guys. One of the first things I wanted to talk about was I saw that HBO was involved in this. So it was shown at the Hamptons International Film Festival. It's being shown here.
It premiered at Sundance.
At Sundance, premiered at Sundance. And so what kind of, is HBO going to be running this, or it will be?
Yeah. HBO came in kind of the last 4 months of me shooting the film, and it's going to be on HBO in February.
Okay. Now, just going back to the beginning, what put you onto this subject?
Well, this fall I had the opportunity to meet Jane Goodall for the first time, and she's our most famous primate explorer, and she was talking about her beginning and how she got involved in it, and she said that she was lucky because she had a great teacher when she grew up and was young, and the teacher was her dog. And we kind of got into this project because of our dog. We had a big St. Bernard Akita, who was kind of our office mascot. And, we were looking for a new project, and our dog Bix had recently died. And kind of a zen thing was that a friend of ours walked in to our office, and told us about Steve Wise and what he was doing. And it just kind of seemed right. It was, an animal project. We loved animals. We didn't know anything about the law or really that much about animals, but it interests us. And most of the projects, including even Penny's famous film about Bob Dylan, come to us because kind of people walk in our door and say, you should do a project about this.
Well, you certainly explored it in depth. So how long ago was that when you first met Stephen Wise, or heard about Stephen Wise, and then went after this project?
How long ago?
God, it seemed like ages. It was about at least 4 years ago.
It was
more.
in 2012.
Yeah.
2012.
But
okay.
Dancing with the law is a long process. You don't hurry it up, whatever your needs are. So we kind of understood that it was going to stretch out. And I learned so much about more than just chimpanzees that, again, it was rewarding for me. I'm very grateful for Steve for just bringing it to us.
And there was a lot of education for me in this, not only about the animals, which I just want to know more about all the time, and I had studied some of primatology before and knew about some of the signing and the language and other things that were going on, but the emotional content for the gorilla, that kind of thing, interesting, but also about the law, the things that we learned about the law in this picture. And again, to the beautiful filmmaking aspect, the way those things were cut together. And yes, it's a long haul with the law, but by the way that you edited it and the research, and so bits were drawn out, and it kept it going at a rate that's not like the law, which is glacial in pace.
It was a real challenge. What was going to be a fairly simple story about one chimpanzee, Merlin, turned into a story about 3 different lawsuits, which, editing-wise was very complicated to explain. I mean, it was complicated enough to kind of let people understand what habeas corpus meant in this regard, and then to kind of explain all these 3 cases was a true challenge. And, I was very thankful. This is really the first time that I worked with an editor, and, just about halfway through, I brought in Pax Wasserman to edit with me, and it was great to have somebody.
Well, and the legal explanation of habeas corpus, which I've heard about my entire life, but didn't understand as clearly as I understand it now. It was educational in a lot of different ways, and the aspect of personhood, and the argument that kept coming back before the legal argument about being bound by the appellate court. But the argument that kept coming back, is this an animal welfare case? Which is a compelling argument that
Yeah.
it should be an animal welfare case because you're asking them to go from a place that's not good to a place that is good. But the thing at the root of it, the autonomous being, and being entitled to rights as an autonomous being, so that if you imprison a person or enslave a person, they at least understand what's going on to them, whereas an animal does not necessarily understand, except they understand, according to your film, that they are imprisoned. They know they are in captivity, and they expect to not be released from captivity because there's no logic that tells them, I will get out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like I have a term, you know what I mean? I have a sentence. So all of it fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, the root of Steve's argument is that he has dealt with a lot of animal abuse cases, and using the laws that are there now, whether they're animal welfare laws or legislative laws or USDA or whatever, quite often fall short. And I'm sure if there's anybody here who deals with animals and animal rights, they know this very well, how hard it is to enforce the type of laws they are, because a lot of them are not meaningful. I mean, all of these chimpanzees were kept legally in those enclosures, and that's often the case, and that was the challenge, and the reason that he felt that there needed to be a right. And it's gone on where we've had, even with the awareness now, we've had the the endangered species laws, and other laws have been enacted, but they also fall short, or sometimes they can be used and sometimes they can't. I mean, just recently the Endangered Species Act was cited for some tigers that were kept in a very abusive situation in Iowa, and the Animal Legal Defense Fund did a lot of research with, they had drone shots at the place and over a long period of time to really prove their case that these tigers were abused, and the judge ruled in their favor. And so then some activists tried to use the same precedent for this very famous orca, Lolita, who's kept in a bathtub basically in Florida, and has been performing for almost 40 years. And the judge said that Lolita wasn't abused enough. So it's a very complicated thing. So through a lot of this time of me spending this journey with Steve and wondering his ideas to argue for personhood for an animal are novel.
Right.
But through the years I've become more convinced that they're necessary, or something is necessary to change.
And I think that what's encouraging, I think, is at the end of the film, talking about worldwide some of these things happening. And I think that one of the headlines that I saw that made the most sense to me was saying that an animal was considered a non-human person, which is to engage them with some rights without the responsibilities and duties appertaining thereunto and so forth, but to say that this is a non-human person, just the same way as a corporation is a non-human person, but has the right to not be taken, which is the discouraging part of it, that under the law it was fine for Tommy, without notifying the courts, to be moved to another place. And so one hopes that the effort to get Hercules and Leo moved out to the Save the Chimps place and so forth. And it's also
Actually an update on the Tommy.
Okay, great.
Because a lot of investigators, including some from Britain, who were very interested in this case too, and in Europe, a lot of their animal rights laws or animal welfare laws are much further along than they are in the United States. And they sent investigators to that zoo, and the zoo would not say they had Tommy there, and no one has found Tommy there. So he also sent investigators to Lavery in upstate New York again, and it seems that probably Tommy is still in upstate New York. So Steve has actually gotten a date in January. He will go do another appeal for Tommy in the New York City courts, arguing that Tommy can observe rights and responsibilities and bear rights and responsibilities, and he has all these new affidavits from Jane Goodall and many other primatologists that chimpanzees, both in the wild and in captivity, can do this. I was saying to Steve that he should get Jane Goodall to be in the court that day, because nobody wants to tell Jane she doesn't know her business. But
No, I think
I
that's
don't know if
I
that'll
think that's a
happen.
great idea. And the other thing that was encouraging is to see, because I was wondering throughout, by focusing on the chimpanzees, and I was thinking about the elephants and the cetaceans.
Yeah.
And then to return to the elephants at the end, very encouraging, and a few shots of the cetaceans. But, and I think that the argument, where do you draw the line? Where does it happen? So is it all sentient beings? Is it no animals and so forth? And he was pretty clear on that. And it is starting the discussion. It's not necessarily saying this is it forever and ever, or we've given up too much ground, or we haven't gained enough ground, or whatever. But it's starting the discussion, which I think is fantastic.
It also had I was interested in it almost from the beginning because it had a kind of futurizing quality, the whole story, because I think, it's just, I think that in 20 years or in another couple generations, we'll probably stop eating meat. It's just too expensive worldwide, and they'll find a way to make artificial meat, and people will all regularly eat it, and that'll be the end of the problem. But I think our relationship with animals will change. And I think that's interesting because animals, I've always thought of that they had an amazing ability to survive, even under the most, difficult conditions. And I think that we'll learn something more about them. We'll learn that probably how to talk to them, to actually conversate. We'll find out how they think and what's going on and how they converse. We don't even know now how ants can converse with each other, and they can. So we know so little about them because we've never bothered to study them. But I think when we do that, our ability to survive in a very hostile planet, which I think we're on now, on a course of making it more hostile, I think our ability to survive will depend on what we know. And I think animals will be of some help in finding that out.
Well, I certainly hope so, and I think that's very apt, because we have not done such a great job with our stewardship of the planet. Now, animals have never ruined the planet.
No.
You know what I mean? It's not their responsibility, and they've gone and learned how to get along. I always liked the fact that cetaceans came up on land and went back to the ocean. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to know that's much smarter than what we've done.
Yeah.
Because they're better off in the ocean and without men around, or mankind around. And we haven't done such a great job. So I'm hoping that as we understand the fate of the planet, and the fact that fleas and horseshoe crabs have been around for 400 million years.
Yeah.
Now they've been through a lot of cataclysms, and they managed to survive.
Yeah.
Which there's very few cataclysms that we're equipped to survive.
I know.
You know what I mean? And so we must get into a partnership, not only interspecies,
Yeah.
but also
That's what I think
humankind. There has to be partnerships. Well, I hope so, because that's the way forward. I do want to open it up because we don't have that much time, unfortunately. Please.
Did people hear the question about?
The question is about the horse carriages in New York, and whether the recent efforts to say there shouldn't be horse carriages in New York. And the gentleman was saying that he thought as a child, when he experienced it, that animals should still be in New York. There should still be animals in New York. And the question is, how do you feel about that?
I definitely feel they shouldn't be used like that. I think it's kind of a cruel thing for them. And, the funny thing is when Steve first walked in our office and, he told us what he was going to do, and, that he was going to argue that an animal could be a legal person, and we talked about it. And then I said to him, well, what about zoos? Because I also felt as a child growing up, I loved the opportunity to go to a zoo and see the animals. I never really put myself in the place of the animal and thought of, what it was like for them to be in a cage that's, 12 feet by 12 feet forever.
Would you see a time when there would no longer be a beast of burden? You would not be able to harness a horse or any animal for any purpose like that?
Well, I haven't evolved as far as Steve has. in terms of this, but I have to say that, this film, I think, probably educated Penny and I more than maybe any of the films, and changed the way that we think of things. And, right now, I do not think that, the animals should be kept in zoos in that way. I think it's wrong and abusive, and that we have to just start changing, the way we think of them. I mean, it's not like we can open the doors and, put the animals back in Africa or anything, but we certainly can look at how we're keeping them in those situations and try to do it as best we can for them.
Imagine if in order to educate children and show them the world, you put Frenchmen in the zoo. I mean, it's as silly as that in a way, but it's never occurred to us. That's what's interesting. We never thought about it.
Well,
And I think we're starting to now.
We did have a person in the Bronx Zoo. We had a pygmy
That's
from
right.
Africa who was on display in like the early 1900s. He was one of them. Yeah.
That's good. I think we have time for one more question. Right there.
Yeah. It seemed in the film your camera was everywhere, including a number of courts, and just wondered if you had any trouble bringing that about.
Yes, it was a huge challenge to get into the courts, although, the New York's courts, have different rules at different levels, but, they want to say that they want to be fair and open if they can, but you have to get the permission from each judge to film in their court, different rules each place. I mean, obviously, they didn't think they were going to get an appearance with Judge Seiss in the beginning, because everybody had said, and for 30 years, Steve said, no one is going to hear you, blah, blah, blah. And then, immediately Judge Seiss let him in, and, I was there. I didn't ask to film in the middle of it because it was such a important, monumental moment for them. I didn't want to interrupt this, spontaneous thing that happened. It was very painful as a filmmaker just to sit there and not film. But, we did get into the other courts, but it was always a challenge, and half the challenge is the technology of it. When I filmed in the appellate court in Albany, no one had ever asked, even though it's our state capital and a lot of cases are there, if you could kind of plug into the audio system to get good sound, because whenever televisions go there, they just want a picture and then their anchor man talks all over it like wallpaper. So that was a huge challenge, and they did allow me to do that. The Rochester court did not, so it was more of a challenging situation for me there. In New York, at the last minute, I asked Judge Jaffe and the Assistant Attorney General if I could put a radio mic on them, just because the room was so booming, and they allowed it. But it's always different, and I would like to film anyway if Tommy gets brought up again in the New York court and use it in some way. I mean, I've already kind of changed the ending cards on these films. In Sundance, it said something. Then for the broadcast in Europe, it said this, and I'm not sure what it will change to by the time it goes on the air.
Well, I hope it.
There's the thing that always fascinated me when we went into the space race. We had all these rockets we'd figured out how to build, and nobody wanted to get in them. So they went to Africa, and they brought back maybe 1,000 chimpanzees, all seized from their mothers, who then left. And they put them in, and they could teach a 3 or 4 year old chimpanzee how to run a rocket. And there's stories of how they did it, even though they had ways of, if they made a mistake, they could give them a little jab of electricity. Even a rocket that wasn't running properly, and the chimpanzees was getting jabbed with electricity, he still continued to run it properly. And then when they found it was safe enough to put a person in the rocket, the chimpanzees were all thrown out into the backyard somewhere and turned over to the drug companies to test drugs on, which is kind of not a very nice way to reward them. But that is what happened. So I think if chimpanzees were pissed off, they have a reason.
Yeah, I would say. Well, thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much, everyone.
And I hope that I hope it's good news when you add to the cards. I hope you do. What a great way to end this incredible festival. Thank you so much to you guys, and please come back next year, vote for this one, donate to support this wonderful festival, and thank you all for coming.